I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching Questions Show on the Coaching Conversations podcast with Jim Knight. This show is for everyone that calls the Instructional Coaching Group home for all your instructional coaching content. These episodes are designed for everyone who desires to think and learn alongside Jim and myself as you continue to make an impact with all the great work you do. I'm Jessica Wise, a proud member of our ICG consultant team. Today's episode is all about the 7 success factors for effective instructional coaching. Once our Q&A has come to a close, we'll have an epilogue or a final note at the end of the show with a question to wrap up our discussion before we sign off. So on with the show. Hi, Jim.
Jessica, how's things going?
Things are going. It's been a great week. I can't believe it's Friday already. How about
It
you?
is. Yeah, well, I wish it wasn't because I have so much still to do today that I haven't gotten done, but it's been great. Weather's gorgeous. It's like 77 and sunny, and the mosquitoes haven't landed just yet, so it's kind of the perfect time of the year. It's
Oh,
been
yes. Yeah. We're in that season here in Georgia where you open the door and there's just a sheet of mosquitoes to greet you and mayflies and bees. Yeah, they're here. It's
You
happening.
have the bugs. We don't have the bugs.
We have a lot of bugs, too many
They're
bugs.
they're coming though. They'll be here soon.
Yeah, well, we're happy to send ours your way if you're interested.
That's okay. No, no, no.
Our new puppy has decided that he likes spiders, so he'll run through the yard and chase the spiders at night, which is quite terrifying, actually.
Is this the evil dog?
This is the evil dog, yes.
Is he chilled out at all, or is he still evil?
I mean, slightly he has chilled out. I took a video and sent it to one of our teammates, Nazarene, because she is on his side on this whole battle of the dog. And I said, look how evil he is. And of course, he sits and wags his tail and looks cute in the video. And I thought, you've ruined it. I'm trying to prove my point here.
Right. Right. Well, he's not stupid.
No, no, he's like, not on camera. I'm going to be great.
Mm.
Well, Jim, I'm excited about our conversation today. And you have this wonderful book, The Definitive Guide to Instructional Coaching, and you share about these 7 success factors for effective instructional coaching. So, our questions will be around that topic today. And I wondered to start if you could set the scene for us. Where did these 7 success factors come from? And I'm curious, why 7, Jim?
Well, 7, because seven's a good number. The 7 deadly sins, 7 numbers on a phone number, the 7 continents, the 7 seas, the 7 things Miley Cyrus hates about you. There are all those sevens. There's lots of sevens, the 7 success factors. So, but it just happened that way because we were trying to figure out what coaching looks like. We spent 25 years studying it. When we started, as we discussed before, we just came up with the term. There was nobody else who was an instructional coach. We had reading coaches, and I thought, well, we should have instructional coaches too. And so I remember the first time I met somebody who was an instructional coach, and I'm like, that's our term. How did you get that? And then we've been studying it in lots of different ways, and it just became clear that these 7 success factors emerged from the work we did. I spent almost a decade every day in the school district, Topeka School District. Before that, I worked in the Lawrence School District, where we were continually trying to figure out what could coaching look like. First, I was the coach, and then we got a Gear Up grant to fund the work of having coaches in all the middle schools and high schools eventually in Topeka. And we just kept learning every day. Every week we would get together. We talk about what worked, what didn't work, what can we do differently. I was interviewing principals, working with teachers. I was embedded in the district for 10 years looking at coaching. And we've continued that study in Othello, Washington, and then different studies we're doing. I'm in the midst of one right now, in fact, looking at Brian Goodwin's work as a part of coaching. So all of that continuous study, some of them rigorous qualitative, some of them rigorous quantitative, some of them more informal. These things have emerged, these 7 things. And I would say, I've been saying this a lot recently, they're not nice to haves, they're must haves. All 7 have to be in place, or your change initiative, not just coaching. I would say your change initiative is going to flounder without these things being in place.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jim. I really like the number 7. I was so happy. We've got 7 partnership principles, 7 success factors. I was number 7 when I played softball. So when you have all these number 7s, I feel very seen because softball is very important in our life. So number 7 was like, yes. Yeah.
Well,
Seems to
good. I'm glad that's your number. There's some great great athletes have worn number 7, you being one of them. So that's good.
High school good though, not beyond that, but
Mhm.
so Jim, you talked to us about these emerged from years of research. I wonder if you could talk about the logic behind these 7 success factors.
Well, they're kind of organized into 3 categories. So there's who I am and what I do and where I work. And the who I am is how I present myself in a way that's going to be most supportive to the person I work with. We don't really like the word resistance because resistance implies I'm doing something to you and you should do it. And if you don't do it, you're resisting. And as Miller and Rolnick, they're my favorite people talking about resistance, as they say, you know, it takes 2 people for there to be resistance. And so a more important question might be, what am I doing that's limiting the likelihood of this person to work with me? So the first thing is, how do I position myself as a person who's in alignment with the teacher? It's like sometimes change is like wrestling. I'm trying to get you to do something. Sometimes it's like dancing, and we want change that's more like dancing. 2 people moving together kind of in harmony. And the second part is what I do, and that's the way in which we walk people through setting a goal, hitting a goal, and to make that happen, there's things you need to do. And then where I work is living in a setting where the conditions I work in help me flourish as a coach or help change flourish. So that's really the idea. And to really be successful, who you are, what you do, where you work, those are the big things you have to address.
Mhm. It's really helpful. And you have a nice diagram in the definitive guide to instructional coaching that shows how they all fit together so nicely. I wonder, how can people listening, from our instructional coaches to our leaders to even our district or system leaders, how can we use these 7 success factors to set up an instructional coaching program?
Well, they function like a rubric, I would say. So you should be, and this is one of the cool things about the spiral bound IC toolkit is that you can use the assessment at the start of it as kind of where are we now with respect to this? And then evaluating instructional coaching, it gives you all the tools you need to set up an evaluation system around these 7 success factors. So do we know our practices? Have we are we highly proficient in the way we move through the coaching cycle? Do we work from the partnership principles? Do we actually have time to coach? Does our system allow us? All those things are kind of addressed in those 7 success factors. And to me, it's just like if I'm evaluating a student's writing, I would use a rubric to look at how well are their paragraphs organized and what do the mechanics look like? And is their voice and are they backing up what they're saying? I would look at the 6+1 traits for writing and create a rubric. Well, this is kind of like that. That's actually occurs to me 7 traits. But at any rate, uh, that's the idea. And it's not fair to put coaches out there and not give them the professional development they need, however you organize it, to succeed. If a coach doesn't have a set of teaching practices that they understand deeply, or they don't know how to gather data, or they're not really good listeners, which are all learnable traits, all learnable things, they're going to have a hard time being successful. In fact, they're not going to be successful.
Thanks for sharing that, Jim. I'm so glad you brought up evaluating instructional coaching. The consultant team at ICG and then GCI, we all met this week to gather around our offering, exploring the 7 success factors, which is perfect for this conversation. And one of the things we talked about is it's really helpful to have a deep understanding of all these success factors and to know how to collect data and monitor progress toward goals like deep implementation of effective IC programs. And so we brought up the importance of evaluating instructional coaching because, much like you talk about in the impact cycle, data is helpful, teaching strategies is helpful and must haves. So is data and strategies to improve as we work toward effective IC programs. So if a school district or a school says, well, we really want to get good at IC, we want to improve our program. And we can use these rubrics from evaluating instructional coaching to do that. We can lean on these 7 success factors. The data from the 360 evaluation or from the tools helps us see our progress. And then the strategies are what you just said, that professional development for coaches and anyone involved in that program to continue to improve. What do you think about that?
Well, I think one of the big values of the data is it gives you a measure of success,
Mhm.
and so getting really good at, and that's really the idea of a student focused goal. If you have a student focused goal, you're putting the emphasis where it needs to be. And so having that data, it becomes a way of measuring your impact. I think there should be no doubt that what the coach does has this kind of output, whatever it might be. And so to me, that's changes in the engagement, the well-being, and the achievement of students. That should be measurable. So we can say, this is what I did, this is the outcome I got. Our approach to professional development flips the traditional model. And so what we do is, well, what most people do, or what frequently happens, is there's research that's conducted. Consultants learn about the research. They show up at the school and they teach the teachers about that research. And then the teachers are expected to implement it. And because there's research in support of it, that's supposed to have an impact on kids. But the real focus of the professional development is on fidelity of implementation. You have to do the thing the right way. If you do it the right way, we'll have an improvement in kids. But what often happens is teachers go to the workshops. They don't necessarily see the relevance of it. They maybe try it. They often don't have enough support to help them get good at it. And when they try it, it feels kind of clumsy. This isn't the way I usually teach. And the easiest thing to do is to drift back to your old way of teaching. So then the system creates more and more, I'm going to say draconian or oppressive, but they amp up the pressure to do it. So they create walkthroughs and they tie evaluations to it, but still you don't get high quality implementation. And then pretty quickly you drift to something else and there's a new focus on what you're doing. We flip it. We say, let's start with kids. Let's figure out what the kids need. And then let's look at that analysis of the kids using data to set a goal that the teacher sets. And the teacher might set it in partnership with the coach, but they say, this is something that my kids really need. I'm really committed to this goal. And then the coach and the teacher get together and say, well, what does research tell us about how we can hit that goal? Research is just as important in our model, but our model, starting with kids, the teacher is a decision maker through the whole process. They're focusing on the thing that's most relevant to them. And then that student-focused goal, they said, it's a measure of success. If you don't hit the goal, you haven't been successful. Or at least if you don't make movement towards the goal, you're not succeeding. And then when you start to evaluate the program, you can say, what were the goals that were set? What were the goals that were hit? There's a direct line between what the coach does and the outcome you get. If you go the other way, often the measure of success is fidelity of implementation. But what if you do everything on check every box on the checklist and you don't see a change in students? I don't consider that successful. Successful to me starts with kids. So starting there is really key. And the heart of the matter is the data piece.
Mhm. That's so helpful. I have been part of change initiatives where we started with research and then we were handed the materials, you implement the materials, and then we talk about the change that we're seeing in kids, which was none. So I understand. I've been a part of that. So, Jim, you're talking about starting with kids, giving teachers autonomy, making sure that we all believe that it's really important. They're the decision makers, setting student focused goals, coaches partnering with teachers to help meet those goals, and using high impact teaching strategies to make that happen. So, as we think about the students, the teachers, the coaches, the leaders supporting those coaches, what can the system do to make sure that they're supporting these initiatives or that cycle of students first and then rolling down to teachers and coaches? How can a system or leaders support that work?
I just want to follow up on your first point that's what you did. What I described, that research first, is exactly how we did professional development when we started studying coaching 25 years ago. I worked at the University of Kansas. They're famous for developing high impact, effective teaching practices for teaching concepts or mapping content or teaching kids metacognitive skills. Very direct instruction approach. So it's not necessarily for everybody, but designed mostly for kids with learning disabilities. And so I would show up and say, look, the research has been done. I had like a mountain of overheads. The research has been done. This is what you need to do. I'm not going to give you the book unless you promise you'll do it the right way, because research has been done. You need to do it the way research says. And you could just feel the vibe in the room that people weren't happy. They didn't feel like they were partners in the process. So I read really widely in the literature, and I discovered that it makes more sense to position ourselves as partners. So I might say a bit about that since I started that, and then we'll come back to the system support. Um, the uh, the the challenge we face, I think, in terms of successful coaching is there's an idea in our mind that the best way to help people learn new things is to tell them exactly what they need to do. And that is a good way to explain things that are very simple. Like if I'm trying to figure out how to do this uh, online visa system thing. Have somebody to tell me, like, click this box, do this. This is what this means. Somebody telling me what to do when it's cut and dried and simple. That makes sense. But when it comes to professional practice, the notion that I am the only one who knows what you need to do, and so I'm going to tell you what you need to do, and you should just sit and listen and be grateful for my wisdom, isn't really the best solution. The best solution is to work it out together. And so, one of our success factors is the partnership approach. When you have a true partnership conversation amongst equals, there's energy in the conversation. There's mutual sharing. There's a sense of we're in this thing together, and it's a what I call a mutually humanizing conversation. We both both feel seen. We feel better for having had the conversation. And we're more effective in sharing ideas when we acknowledge the simple fact that people only do what they choose to do. And so I could say, well, you need to teach this strategy and teach it this way. Or I could say, here's this strategy. How do you want to modify it for you and your kids? And I want the person to say to me, whatever they're thinking. Well, I don't really want to do it this way because I've got some kids who this is their needs, or, as a teacher, I'm more comfortable with this. I don't want them to be sitting there nodding their head yes and thinking no. I want them to feel comfortable telling me what they think. So the partnership approach is, well, let's go through this description of the strategy. You chose the goal, you chose the strategy. Let's talk it through, and then we'll figure out how you want to do it. And you can tell me whatever you think. And the thing is, if the teacher modifies it in a way that's not going to help kids, they won't hit the goal. The goal becomes an objective standard for excellence. So you keep going until you hit it. So how do you set that all up in a system? The first thing I'd say is widespread understanding of those 7 success factors. We can't just guess at these things. We need depth of knowledge. There needs to be widespread understanding of how we approach change and what's the theory behind it, what's the beliefs behind it, what's the evidence to support it. We can't be making snap decisions. Well, it should be like this, it should be like that. It should be grounded in pretty clear evidence. And so I think widespread understanding within the system of what it looks like. And then leaders who continually go back and analyze and assess what's happening with a clear sense of, like, one of my favorite quotes I heard a couple days ago is this Buddhist quote: "You're perfect in everything you do, in every way, and you could get better." and that's the way I see it. Like, gathering data on what's working and what's not working. It's not to say you're not a good person, but we need to know, did the strategy work? Did it work for kids? So a clear picture of reality, ground in those success factors, and then for leaders to be coached themselves, to learn a coaching approach. So we have that introduction to leadership coaching as a possibility. People could read John Campbell, Christian Van Nuremberg's book, An Introduction to Leadership Coaching, or the guide to leadership coaching. There are a lot of ways to grow and develop. I think I just interviewed 2 people yesterday from a school outside of Melbourne, and their thing was, we did a ton of professional learning. She said we had a vision and we were tenacious. I think that's a really good way to describe it. We've got a really clear sense of these things have to be in place and why they have to be in place. And we're continually doing the learning we need to do to make it happen. And I guess the last thing I'd say is there are many things we describe, like how principals can support coaches, having policy around things like confidentiality and so forth. But it's really about zoning in on the most important elements of what it is. So getting really clear. Maybe that tool, you can download it for free, on the 7 success factors, constantly looking at it, understanding it deeply, and focusing on that, because and then teaching is going to be a huge variable in whether or not students can succeed. It's not everything. The community outreach is a really huge part of that. Leadership development's part of that. But how teaching works, it really makes a huge difference. And so we don't want to just pretend it's working. We need to know, is what we're doing working? Are we seeing an impact? And that all comes into that too. So it's a long, rambling response. I think it's been about 22 minutes since you asked the question, but there's a
If
lot
Boston will
going
put
on.
a commercial in the between there somewhere.
That's right. That's good. That's good.
Well, Jim, as you were talking, I started to hear how everything connects, and I know they connect. You've talked about it many times, but for example, you're talking about system support, and in it, data. So system support and data are there. And while you're talking about the impact cycle, you're mentioning our approach is really important. That's the partnership principles. All of them are very connected. You've said they're must haves, not nice to haves. But a question we often receive is, but which one do I really need? Like, can I skip some? Which one is most important? So I wonder if you can address that for our listeners.
When I'm parachuting, what's more important, to have a parachute on or to know how to make the parachute work? I probably need to know both. If I'm wearing a parachute but I can't pull the thing, it's not going to be that helpful. So there is that sense in which it would be great if we could do that matrix thing where you just put a chip in your head and all of a sudden you learn everything. I would say, I'm curious to see what you think about this too, but my take would be the two most important things. Well, first off, I would read the definitive guide. I would be aware of all 7 factors. I would start thinking about, I'd be practicing the way I listen and ask questions if I have children at home with my kids if I'm in a committed relationship with my partner or my friends. I'd be trying out the skills all the time. I'd be watching myself communicate on video. You might even watch yourself communicating on video and load it into ChatGPT to get feedback on how you communicate. Who talked the most, you know? And ask permission of the person to do that before I did it. So, but if I had to nail it down to two things, I would say until you're doing the impact cycle, nothing else really matters. The impact cycle is like the swimming pool for someone learning how to swim. You got to get in the water. And so you need to get in there and you need to be doing that. And then the mindset behind coaching, that idea of being a partner, partnering rather than telling, you know, I'm not parenting the teacher. I see ourselves as equal professionals engaged in professional discourse. Understanding the partnership principles and the impact cycle, to me, those would be the two things. But, listening and questioning follows quickly behind partnership, and understanding how to set goals. So that's data, and understanding how to hit the goals. That's teaching strategies. That falls quickly behind the impacts. And once you get into the impact cycle, you're going to have to figure out, well, how do we pick a goal and where do the strategies come from? So those things they all kind of follow each other pretty quickly. But I'd say until you're doing the impact cycle, not the learning is not going to make much sense. You could watch a video on how to swim, but you got to get in the water. Now, I will tell you, somebody said, actually, my son taught himself how to swim by watching YouTube. So maybe it's possible, but nonetheless, I'm going to stick with my analogy. Most of us have to get in the water to learn how to swim.
I think that's a good analogy. The impact cycle is the swimming pool where you learn. That's really good. I think that's our next T-shirt for ICGs.
Right.
Impact cycle is the swimming pool.
Dive in.
I like that. That's really good.
Right,
And
right.
that's advice you share with our virtual and maybe even in-person participants is people who are hesitating to do the impact cycle, they want to make sure they have everything right. Just give it a go. Just start because that's where you'll learn.
Right, right, right. And we have coaches for coaches, so people could do the one-to-one coaching as a way to do it too. What's your answer to that question? When people ask you where to start, what do you say?
I think of the 5 complexities of helping. That was that was really fundamental in my learning as to be a coach is to understand that we are complex creatures. And I think the one that stands out to me the most is identity. And you
Mm,
shared with us that our professional practice is very personal. And that's why our identity is always at stake in our conversations about our practice. So when I think about these 7 success factors, I think they're very personal. I think that for me as an instructional coach, I probably needed to work on my data collection, or I needed to make sure that everything we did aligned with our system's high impact teaching strategies. We called them quality plus teaching strategies. And so my journey to make sure I was in deep implementation of the success factors might look very different than even an instructional coach in the same system or a leader in that system. But we're all learning the same content. We're all working toward the same goal. Our journey might look a little different. And maybe we even jump ahead to our epilogue question, which is how do I know? So, given everything I just said, how do I know where to start? If I know these are important, I'm on a different path than maybe a newer instructional coach or a veteran instructional coach. How do we even begin with implementation of these success factors?
well, I think it's probably the evaluation tool in the IC toolkit as a starting point to look it over, to make sense of that, to read that evaluation tool with the definitive guide in hand. So as you look at each, take time to look at each success factor and think about how to evaluate it. I think in terms of getting in the swimming pool, if we want to stick with that analogy, I think all over there are many, many checklists all over the place for the impact cycle, but to have a checklist, make sure you understand the impact cycle. And so looking through that checklist of the part, now you might change it later on. You might say, I have to skip this part or change the order or whatever. But I think I wouldn't want to change it until I've tried it out enough to know why I'm changing different things. I mean, it's different for us. The way we talk about, we started talking about contracting just in the last few months in a more explicit way than we have in the past. And we didn't have peers goals when we started. We didn't use video when we started. We're always learning. And so we should be learning with other people. It's not perfect by any stretch, but I wouldn't want to modify it until I've tried it out. There are reasons why we want people to get a clear picture of reality before they set the goal. There are elements of goal setting that we think are really important based on our experience working for decades with teachers. So I think individually nailing the impact cycle, understanding it, finding a influential person in the school who's really nice, who'll give you feedback, who'll let you read your notes and work through it and practice, but also who'll speak highly of coaching after you're done. Getting that person to work with and working with that partner, or conceivably, if you're a part-time teacher, part-time coach, finding someone else in your system who's in the same role coaching each other could be really, really valuable. But I think systemically, it's understanding the 7 success factors, using the evaluation tool to say, where are we now? Where do we want to get to? And then personally, it's the same thing with teachers. Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? How can we use the impact cycle to take us there? Where would you start? You wake up tomorrow and you're given this job of managing a coaching program. You have world enough and time. What would you do?
Well, I like your idea of the evaluating instructional coaching rubric. So I might just gather some data on where we are right now, but I could also use the success factor needs assessment, the tool you mentioned earlier. And you just, in a moment ago, talked about current reality. That's another tool to capture current reality of implementation of the success factor. So I might start by going through that survey, that tool, and seeing where we are right now with each of the factors and then sorting them. I think we should start here, like you're talking about the impact cycle. Let's get really good at the impact cycle. And then maybe we can talk about those high impact. We can create an instructional playbook so that our coaches have something to leverage in the learn stage. So that tool, which is really helpful, I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, and you can take playbooks that already exist. High impact construction comes with a model, or excuse me, the impact cycle is the one that comes with a model playbook, but you can find that playbook online in our resources section. You don't have to buy the book to get it. So there's nothing wrong with using things that already exist. You just have a deep understanding of what's there. I mean, ultimately, the playbook should be continually getting better as you refine it and you learn when you work with students and teachers.
I didn't give you a chance to respond. I'm curious, what did you think about my comparison to my journey with the success factors to the idea of identity? Like it's very personal to me.
I think that idea of identity, which I've written about quite a bit, and I learned it from a lot of different people. Parker Palmer and The Courage to Teach, which is he's one of the Don Deschler Award winners. Really, really influenced me. Um, the whole identity that Sheila Heen talks about. I've got a podcast with both these people, Sheila Heen and Parker Palmer. But um, that whole idea of how we take things personally, and it gets in the way. I think it's a complex thing to work with people and not, the way I put it when I talk about identity is imagine that your sister was raising your nephew or your niece, and you think, I really love that kid, and my sister's making a mistake in the way they're parenting. I'm gonna go tell her she's not raising her kid right. How easy would that conversation would be? It'd be hard because it's personal, and having a conversation like that with a teacher about teaching is almost the same. Teaching's almost as personal as parenting. That's why I think you want to have the teacher guide the conversation. What did you see? And also the notion that we have it right, that we're blessed with this insight, and we don't really know what this person thinks. We don't really know this group of students, but we know better than the teacher what to do. It's kind of silly. I think starting with the teacher, asking them how they see it, because trying to talk them into our view, which could be wrong anyway, isn't the best way. It's more important what they think as a way to work it through. So I think identity is always at play. And one way around that is compassion, but it's also about giving them some focus. Why is that so important to you, that idea of identity?
Mhm. I think because this is a way to evaluate where we are right now. And that evaluation, whether it's about our professional practice or our parenting, is very much a reflection of how hard we're working. It's like when you talk about,
It matters.
yes, it matters. The Harvard negotiation project is, am I worthy of all of the love or the praise or my self-worth? It's all measured by how well I'm doing at work. So I think as just be kind is what I'm left thinking as you learn about these success factors, work to implement them, work to collaborate with your leaders or your system as you implement them. And as you do, just be aware of wherever you are, it's okay. Excuse me. And you'll continue to get better. Like you said, there's always room to get better.
Yeah, I got two quick thoughts. I don't want to belabor this, but one of them is Christian Van Nuremberg's line is, and a lot of people have said this, but I learned it from him. Everybody is going through something. Everybody's dealing with something. And the other one is just watching Claudia Owad as she's a coach and a leader. Strengths first. The way in which she's able to communicate her that she sees your strengths and bring it through, the way she does that in coaching, the way she does it as a leader. I've learned a lot from her about how to do that just from the way she interacts with people. So I think those are two ways of addressing this issue of identity.
Mhm. Well, thanks for sharing, Jim. Is there anything else you'd like to say about our topic before we wrap up?
Well, let me do a quick review, just really quickly, if that's okay, because I spent years writing this darn book, so I want to do a review. So the who I am is, what are the assumptions or beliefs that are guiding my work? And I would say there are assumptions, whether you're conscious of them or not, that guide what you do. So becoming conscious of the beliefs. Is it all about me being successful? Am I a giver or a taker, to use Adam Grant's language? So understanding the beliefs that guide your work, that's the principles. Then communicating in a way that asks good questions and where you listen effectively. And there are simple little things you can do to really radically improve your listening. Um, so I think looking at the kind of questions you ask, having a list of favorite questions that you pull up and use in different places. But it's also in the listening, what you're doing is you're validating the other person. You're seeing them and you're adjusting what you can do. There's a lot of talk about, is AI going to spell the end of coaching? I don't think so. I don't think a machine, a machine can fake empathy, but it can't genuinely communicate empathy, and it can't read the micro expressions that really say what this person's thinking. And there's an intuitive element to it when you work with people, where you read, oh, that question didn't work, or I don't think I gave the right response here. You're constantly in this adaptive process that I don't think a machine, maybe someday, but it'll still be fake. That, if the machine sheds a tear because of what I say, it's a fake tear. And eventually it's going to be pretty bankrupt. So coaches will need artificial intelligence to help them do their job. It's a power tool for the work, but it's not going to replace coaches. And then the third thing is the leadership. So under who I am, what are my beliefs? How do I communicate? How do I lead? And then under what I do, the second circle is we have a coaching cycle. To make the cycle work, we have data that we can gather. Data helps us see what we didn't see and helps us move forward. And then we have strategies once we set the goal. After we use data to set the goal, strategies to help us hit the goal. That's maybe creating an instructional playbook. And then we work in a system. The third thing is where I work, we work in a system that gives me time, where there's role clarity, where people support what I do. There's widespread understanding of what coaching is. And the last thing I'd say, when those success factors are in place, there shouldn't be any issue of trying to get people to work with you. You've got a person who's going to make it easier for you to focus on the thing that matters the most. And they're going to interact with you in ways that validate you and show you what you're doing. They're going to save you time. They're going to make your life easier. And it's going to make a big difference for your kids. Who wouldn't want to have that? And so when you have a system built around the 7 success factors, what we're seeing, like this school in Melbourne I talked to yesterday, what we're seeing is when those things are in place, coaching isn't something you have to talk people into. Coaching is an enormous benefit for everybody.
Mhm. Thank you for that summary, Jim. And if people are interested, but maybe don't have the definitive guide to instructional coaching, we're going to link an article, Teach to Win, that you wrote, Jim, so that people can maybe dip their toes in a little bit further into these 7 success factors. And then they can join us in institutes. They can join us for exploring the 7 success factors and offering that we have. And to just read the book, The Definitive Guide to Instructional Coaching, and this really cool companion text. I've heard it's spiral bound, and that's the IC toolkit. All right. Well, anything else before we wrap
Well,
up?
yeah, so they're dipping their tools in the swimming pool, is that the idea of what they're doing?
Yes, see, we came full circle with this
Right.
swimming pool. Yeah, that's really great. Well, thank you for listening today, everyone. If you found today's episode helpful, it would help us if you liked or followed the podcast. You can leave us a rating or a comment so we can continue creating meaningful content just for you. Thank you. And until next time, go forth and lead great coaching conversations. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jessica.